Welcome to this week's Weather Extra. I'm First Alert meteorologist Jillian Johnson. A significant severe weather event unfolded across portions of the southern United States last weekend. Back on Saturday, December 9th, at least 11 confirmed tornadoes tore through parts of Tennessee and Kentucky during the deadly severe weather outbreak. Take a look. Tennessee was hit the hardest as multiple damaging tornadoes touched down, including a high-end EF1 twister that damaged a National Guard armory site, a long-track intense EF3 tornado that caused heavy damage in Clarksville, and a strong EF2 tornado that prompted a tornado emergency for the city of Hendersonville. Across the areas that were hit, church buildings were destroyed, dozens of homes were completely flattened or wiped right off their slabs, schools and shopping centers left in shambles, leaving thousands without power and now displaced from their homes. The long-track tornado that tore through Clarksville was on the ground for about 43 miles and at one point was 600 yards wide. The tornadoes killed at least 6 people and injured 72 others, including 62 from the Clarksville area. And take a look at this video, captured by an eyewitness that lives in Tennessee. This person was able to capture the twister quickly spinning and growing in size as it moved over Madison. You could see debris being lifted and spun up into the air along with numerous electrical flashes, the tornado tearing through transformer after transformer, knocking over power line after power line, causing more than 80,000 people to be left without power and would eventually lead to a fiery explosion. And speaking of that explosion, the tornado caused a fireball to erupt at an electric facility near Nashville, Tennessee. And here's a closer look at the moment the tornado arrived. In this video from that electric facility, you could see the wind pick up as the tornado moves closer. Power flash after power flash as heavy rain increased as the twister nears. You could see the power went out and then a huge flash of green appears. And then right after that, the twister moved overhead. An explosion occurred, causing a huge flash of red, yellow, and orange to fill up the sky. We now turn to Emily Schmidt, who has more on the damage left behind from these deadly storms.
There's no word in the dictionary, the mayor of Clarksville, Tennessee says, for what has happened to his community.
Tragically, we lost 3 of our citizens on Saturday, December 9th, a day that none of us expected or wanted.
Oh my God.
The National Weather Service says an EF3 tornado as wide as nearly 6 football fields hit Clarksville Saturday, destroying nearly 100 structures and severely damaging almost 300 more.
Everything just exploded. This is what it really felt like. I feel like everything exploded, like a lot of pressure built up and just popped.
3 people died in Clarksville, including 10-year-old Arlen Burnham, whose dad said was famous for sharing fun trivia facts. The Burnhams lost a son, their home, everything in it, and the tornado continued, ultimately covering nearly 43 miles. Another tornado, an EF2, killed 3 more people in its path from Madison to Hendersonville.
No sooner than we got in here and knelt down on our knees, all this started just caving in. Glass was busting, stuff was flying around. It was crazy.
Before and after satellite images give a small glimpse of what the storms did in seconds, while these images suggest a much longer road ahead. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee said on social media, though the damage is significant, the people of his state are resilient. With thousands now out of their homes or without power, resilience may prove one of the few things the tornadoes left untouched. I'm Emily Schmidt reporting.
While we in Central Texas typically see severe weather during the spring, others across the nation experience it at different times than we do. And you may be wondering why that is. Well, for an in-depth look on how and why severe weather changes throughout the different seasons, we bring in First Alert meteorologist Sean Bellafiore.
No matter what time of year it is, severe thunderstorms have the same 4 ingredients. It's an acronym we meteorologists use called SLIM, standing for shear, lift, instability, and moisture. And those ingredients come together at all different points of the year. When we're talking about moisture, it's coming from the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic, or the Pacific Ocean. Instability is when warm air rises in a colder environment, colder background environment. Lift comes from boundaries, be them dry lines, cold fronts, warm fronts, things like that. But it's also caused by upper level storm systems. But wind shear is the one thing that we're really going to take a look at because that helps or the jet stream, which causes wind shear, helps to determine where the best severe weather will be depending on the time of year it is. Now, the jet stream is a global current of strong winds that moves air masses and helps to create storm systems. When you see a trough in the jet stream, that indicates that there is going to be some stormy weather on the eastern side of that trough. Now, typically the jet stream during the fall and springtime months is variable across the United States, but it's really in the spring that that strong jet stream creates what is colloquially called Tornado Alley. It's coined in 1952 by USAF Major Ernest Fallbush and Captain Robert Miller. Now, historically, Tornado Alley is where most of the tornadoes in a year happens, and it runs from Texas to the northern plains, usually most active during the springtime months. Now, during the summertime months, the jet stream moves up to the north, so severe weather shifts into the northern U.S. and into Canada. But during the wintertime months, the jet stream goes farther to the south, which is where most of the severe weather is during the wintertime season. It's an area of the Deep South called Dixie Alley, which was coined by National Severe Storms Forecast Director Alan Pearson in 1971. Now, Dixie Alley has a higher frequency of strong and long track tornadoes compared to Tornado Alley, and there has been recent studies that suggest that even without the seasons, Tornado Alley is starting to shift more into the Deep South. So it all comes together in the wintertime months in Dixie Alley. Talking about wind shear, the jet stream typically drops down across the central U.S., bringing colder air and, of course, the chance for storms. We get lift from cold fronts, areas of low pressure, and upper-level storm systems. Those are the troughs of low pressure. Instability comes from the differing air masses on one side of the cold front or warm front to the other, and the moisture is coming from, in this case, the Pacific. This was the setup that caused, unfortunately, those deadly tornadoes across Tennessee on December 9th. All the ingredients coming together for those deadly storms. Reporting in the studio, I'm First Alert meteorologist Sean Bellafiore.
Thanks, Sean. And new staggering news, at least 26 different deadly tornadoes have hit the United States so far in 2023. That's the most as seen in a single year since 2011, when more than 550 people died in more than 50 deadly tornadoes. This year, tornadoes have killed 82 people, which is above the average over the past 30 years of 71. Tornadoes have killed people in 12 different states this year, with Mississippi seeing the most fatalities at 24. That is followed by Tennessee, which is 16, including 6 from this past weekend. And it's hard to believe that just in a few days we're getting ready to roll into a new season. On Thursday, December 21st, the winter solstice occurs, with winter officially the season starting at 9:27 p.m. This is also the shortest day of the year. Here's Dan Smith with more on our changing seasons.
We're losing daylight and heating a few minutes at a time in our corner of the world, only to start gaining that first part right back just before Christmas. Welcome to the winter solstice. Many cultures have marked midwinter and midsummer over the centuries, with Stonehenge being a good 5,000-year-old example. Axial tilt is the reason we have seasons, with Earth's poles tilting toward and away from the sun in its annual cycle. The geographic North Pole ends up at just about a 23.5-degree angle away from the sun during December solstice, providing the shortest day of the year for us in the Northern Hemisphere, with a little over 9 hours of daylight in the Midwest. Eventually, we improve to a good 15 hours and change in those hot summer days. Chances are you've heard of the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. Well, those are just the limit lines at which the sun can be directly overhead during those maximum tilts for summer and winter, respectively. For a comparison, at the ends of the Earth, polar nights last for 179 days, with the sun failing to get above the horizon in offsetting shifts. The equinox, or equal night in Latin, tries to have some truth in advertising. The sun lies directly over the equator at that point, giving an equal measure of day and night. At least there would be if it weren't for the size of the sun and different lengths of day at different latitudes, minor details. We're no stranger to the effects of axial tilts. Try working a 9-to-5 shift in the winter with the sun in your eyes commuting both ways. But while some of us are basking in the snow, Australians are baking in the sun. Earth's tilt naturally has the opposite effect for the southern hemisphere, with Aussies experiencing over 6 hours more daylight during the December solstice compared to us. Might feel like Christmas in July by our standards, though on the flip side, higher elevations of New Zealand can see snow when it's actually July. So the next time you find yourself freezing your fruitcake off around the holidays, just remember that those down under are thinking those same jealous thoughts while you're lighting sparklers for the 4th of July. For this week's Moment of Science, I'm Dan Smith.
Well, in this week's Degrees of Science, Brady Taylor sat down with the National Weather Service to learn more about flash flood safety. We'll have their conversation coming up on the other side of this break.
Welcome into this week's Degrees of Science. You know, we talked severe weather safety and what to do in strong storms, but sometimes you may not think about the flooding side of stuff. But the National Weather Service on any given year issues over 4,000 flash flood warnings, and flash flood deaths sometimes can be more than what we talk about on other severe weather. So we're talking with Dr. Amanda Schroeder from the National Weather Service, a hydrologist. So Amanda, when people are thinking floods, not all floods are the same. What's the difference between, say, your regular river flooding and your flash flooding?
Yeah, so there are definitely some differences between river flooding and flash flooding. Typically, the time duration is going to be a little different. Your river floods typically last more on the time scale of days to weeks, whereas the traditional definition of a flash flood would be the rapid inundation of water onto normally dry land over a shorter period of time. So those typically, it's within 6 hours of what caused it, which oftentimes is heavy rainfall. But yeah, so those time scales for flash flooding is usually on the order of minutes to hours, whereas river flooding is days to weeks.
Explain to people, let's talk flash flood, the difference between the advisories you put out, watches, and warnings for that potential of flooding.
So for watches, advisories, and warnings, watches are in your time frame of, they're issued 6 to 48 hours before the event starts. So think of a watch as your ingredients are coming together, but they're not necessarily, the development of the flash flood hasn't started yet. So that's a time for people to become prepared. Now, when it comes to the flood advisories, those are issued once the flood has started or is about to, but those are designated to alert the public for less severe types of impacts. It's more of an inconvenience. That being said, if you don't take caution when you encounter these kinds of floods that an advisory would have been out for, it can harm life and property. So you do need to be careful. So that would be the action for those. When it comes to flash flood warnings or river flood warnings for that matter, those are issued to alert the public when we have the flash flood or the river flood ongoing or about to begin, and those have more significant impacts. So that's a time when you need to take action to protect yourself, because it can be a threat to life and property.
I don't think people understand the strength that rushing water has. What are, I know there's some set levels of kind of to be safe, but how much power does fast moving rushing floodwater have?
Yeah, water in general is very, very dangerous and extremely powerful. It only takes 6 inches of water to knock a person off their feet, and 12 inches of water will begin to float a passenger car. So as you can imagine, the higher the flood gets, the more powerful it can become, and you can end up with massive vehicles being completely washed downstream just because of the sheer power of water.
National Weather Service have come out with a great, easy slogan that everyone should follow, but I don't think everybody does. Talk about the Turnaround, Don't Drown kind of program and kind of slogan that y'all try to get out.
Yeah, so it's been around for a long time, the program for Turn Around, Don't Drown, and there's actually a country song that goes along with it. There's a YouTube for it. But yeah, essentially what it amounts to is when you encountered flooded waters, there's no way to tell accurately how deep that water is, or really even if the roadway beneath it is still there. So your best bet to be safe would be to turn around and not drive through the flooded roadways. And there actually, recent research has shown that when it comes to people encountering flooded roadways, barricades tend to do a pretty good job. Most people don't drive around them, which is good because those are put in place because that's a known safety issue. It's known that that is a dangerous area when it floods. But when it comes to coming into contact with areas that are not barricaded yet, a lot of times people will do what the person in front of them did. Monkey see, monkey do. So a big, massive dually pickup truck may be able to get through it, but it may not. But if it does, and the little passenger car behind it tries to go through, chances are they can't. But there's really no way to know just how deep that water is.
To hear more flood safety tips from the National Weather Service, scan the QR code right there on your screen to watch on YouTube, or go to KWTX.com/degrees of science. All right, straight ahead on Weather Extra, we're just 1 week away from Christmas and beautiful lights are lining up house after house. But have you ever wondered about the science behind Christmas lights? We have answers for you coming up next. Stick with us. Welcome back to Weather Extra. A new analysis and maps from a NOAA climate scientist shows snowfall is declining globally. Scientists say a warmer world means precipitation is more likely to fall as rain than snow. According to the data, there's been a 2.7% decline in annual global snowfall since 1973. It's most notable in the area north of the tropics and south of the Arctic, where most of the world's population resides. And while we might be seeing extreme winter storms in some areas, scientists warn that will decrease as years go on. A major concern from this trend is the impact on water supplies from snowpack melting. And we're seeing a decline in the snow right across the nation right now. As we move through December, many people living in various parts of America have been wondering, where is the snow? If you're hoping for a white Christmas in Central Texas, unfortunately, we have bad news for you. It's not going to happen. And chances of snowfall on Christmas are actually fairly low for the rest of the nation, too. And here's why. White Christmas chances are dwindling as only 18% of the U.S. is snow covered, with no cold air in sight arriving before the holiday. Meteorological winter, which spans from December 1st to February 29th, has been quite mild so far. And according to the Climate Prediction Center, there's no cold air in sight as we head into the holiday, resulting in a considerable shortage of snow in many major cities across the nation. According to the long-range outlook from NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, most parts of the country, including us in Central Texas, are expected to experience warmer than average temperatures through the holiday. These warmer temperatures reduce the chances of heavy snow from occurring. Now, it doesn't mean it won't snow somewhere to finish out the year, but the nationwide forecast is leaning towards more rain than snow as we say farewell to 2023. And speaking of Christmas, Christmas lights bring joy to so many during the holiday season. And you may have wondered, well, how do these lights work? Dan Smith joins us now to untangle the how behind your favorite holiday lights in this moment of science.
Well, that's more like it. Do not adjust your television sets. If you were like my family growing up, the phrase Merry Christmas was about as common as, well, one light goes out, they all go out, or get the flashlight, I blew a fuse. As spectacular as going full Griswold can be, it can also be frustrating when the science doesn't work in your favor. Let's start with your traditional incandescent bulb. If you have a closed circuit, electricity is allowed to flow through a wire into a bulb, making that filament heat up and glow, and then down to the next one. If the filament burns out, open circuit, nothing happens. The thing is, electrons don't flow like cars on a highway. If they run through a copper wire, for example, the atoms in that conductive metal keep transferring electrons down the line. So it's more like a constant fender bender with the next car behind and ahead of you, or a Newton's cradle for a safer analogy. Many of your older light strings tend to be connected in a series circuit, one right after the other. So if one bulb burns out, it breaks that connection and none of them will light. Some strings are doubled up and woven together, so at least half of them will stay lit, but the better solution lies in a parallel circuit. Each bulb gets its own dedicated wire, so if one goes out, the Christmas cheer continues. That's not to say your series lights can't stay on either. Shunt wires are sometimes used to keep that circuit closed, even if the filament burns out. Traditionally, your bulbs are white light shining through colored glass, but they still rely on getting that filament really hot. It's estimated incandescent bulbs still cause over 200 house fires every year. These days, however, a good half of all lighting in the country comes from LEDs, or light-emitting diodes, to do the trick. More efficient, longer lasting, and cold to the touch. Whatever your choice for making spirits bright, make sure those lights and wires are up to code and up to the task. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays from Moment of Science.
Welcome back to Weather Extra. The Japan Meteorological Agency put out a new report that stated November 2023 was the warmest November on record. The report says that November 2023 beat the previous record set in 2020 by 0.3 degrees Celsius and was 1.6 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures. November also marked the 6th month in a row of record global average temperatures. Scientists have said this year's exceptional warmth is the result of the combined effects of El Nino and human-caused climate change. And the Arctic region failed its annual health checkup this year. This summer in the Arctic was the warmest on record. That's according to a report published Tuesday by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA scientists examined the Arctic's vital signs between October 2022 and September of this year. They looked at the changes in sea ice volume, snow cover, air and ocean temperatures, and more. The results showed the vast and typically frozen northern biome saw temperatures hit a record 43 degrees Fahrenheit, and sea ice continued its shrinking trend. These changes threaten the lives of animals and people living in the region, especially those local communities who have long relied on living off the frozen landscape. The Arctic report card comes as scientists already reported 2023 will officially be the hottest year on record. Well, the week ahead is looking mild and quiet for Central Texas until we head closer to the holiday weekend. It may not be the ideal weather for those wanting it to cool off leading up to Christmas, but it is going to be nice. Perfect temperatures to spend some time outdoors and finish up that Christmas shopping. We do have some rain chances moving in as Santa gets ready to come to town. If you're planning on doing any traveling this Christmas, make sure to stay up to date with the forecast. Well, that's all we have for you on this episode of Weather Extra. Have a great week.